Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever the world you're listening and attending this live. My name is Priyanka, a senior growth marketer rather at GEP, and I welcome you all to the second session of FSM Act 2023. In the last session, we briefly touched upon what the act is all about, what it entails, why it's needed now, and why businesses should look into it proactively. In today's 30-minute catch up, we will speak from the procurement lens, like what it means for procurement and procurement excellence leaders in financial sectors. What can they factor in while making soft and hard strategies for 2024? And what can they expect to happen if the process transformation is delayed? We will take up questions from audience during the session, so please feel free to write them in the comment box. Now, without further ado, let me introduce to Rob Jones and Abraham Matthews, our resident experts in the matter, to help us dive deep into the matter. How are you two doing today?
Good, thanks Priyanka. Nice to see you again, and hopefully it should be up for a good session today.
Yeah,
Awesome.
well,
So, are we ready then to have the today's conversation?
Yeah,
yeah.
let's go for it. Let's go for it.
All right then. Rob, please do the honors by laying some groundwork for our audience.
Okay, thanks Priyanka, and welcome everybody. So, yeah, look, in our last episode, perhaps if you joined that session, but if you didn't, we'll just do a quick summation of that. So we sort of delved into the it was a fascinating journey really of the Financial Services and Markets Act of 2023, which is a sort of specific UK piece of legislation, and we traced its origins from the aftermath of the Brexit vote, as the UK government sought to cement the UK's place as a leader in the global financial services market. Basically, and then through to its eventual passing into law in June 2023 this year. So it's been quite a journey, wasn't it, Abe, for this particular act?
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. We also touched upon the third party focus of the bill and how it bestowed powers upon the Treasury, which effectively means that the Treasury can now designate third parties that are critical parties to the entire financial services industry as a whole. They can also direct them to ensure that their operational resilience standards meet the expected requirements. Another thing that we touched upon was also about the dichotomy of the entire bill. While the entire bill is focused on deregulation, making things easier for organizations to operate within the financial services space in the UK, the third party elements seem to be the portion that has increased regulation, primarily focusing on the frameworks that will manage systemic risks posed by critical third parties.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the third party elements really do seem to add that sort of, another layer of burden. And I think this is, my view is this is where it might have the biggest impact on critical third parties or suppliers, as we probably better know them, and actually to procurement teams as well. And I guess this sort of burden was in part linked to the uncertainties around the rules and expectations for critical third parties. So I think last time, as you say, we talked about the powers, and then there was like this kind of void around the rules, and we kind of said it's a bit like the government handed out the powers, but they left the rule book blank at that time. But that was until last Thursday, when very timely, but the Bank of England released a consultation paper, which is sort of snappily called CP 26/23 Operational Resilience Critical Third Parties to the UK Financial Sector. So you can find it on the Bank of England website, and it's actually, doesn't sound it, but it is actually quite an interesting read. And so, but it starts to define some of the rules, and hopefully address some of the uncertainties that we talked about last time. But what's your initial take on the consultation paper, Abe? Any immediate takeaways?
Well, I think firstly that this webcast is really timely in that respect, right? The new consultation paper covers broadly three aspects: the framework to identify CTPs, the resilience standards or the rules effectively, and finally the tools for testing the resilience of the services. So effectively, who does this apply to, what do they need to do, and how will they evidence what they've done? We spoke about the first part in our last session about who applies to effectively. We'll go into the second part a little more in detail today. uh, I don't know, the third part, Priyanka, we could have another session sometime in the new year. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. I mean, yeah. Look, I mean, look, the consultation paper is starting to give some clarity, isn't it? And I definitely expect more to come from there. But let's focus on that second part during the session today. So kind of what do they need to do? Part that you kind of framed there. And I think it's really trying to understand, what's the impact on third parties, and so what does the bill actually mean for procurement functions in banking and financial services sector, and ultimately what the practitioners in financial service industry, what do they need to be focusing on? So let's just delve into that. I mean, at a high level, the new legislation, it does bring a set of challenges. But I think there's also opportunities there for procurement as well. So particularly in respect to their supply base. So I think these kind of challenges and opportunities are fairly wide ranging. So perhaps we can sort of break this down into more manageable and relevant chunks, and we can talk through those in the next few minutes. So I think first up, and this is kind of core to the bill itself, let's talk about operational resilience and compliance with those resilience standards. So I guess the first thing to note is that designated critical third parties, they must meet the minimum resilience standards set by the HM Treasury. And so one of the obvious aspects to this is to make sure you've got a business continuity policy in place, which most organisations do, and a regime for conducting the business continuity testing as well. But I guess probably what we want to talk about today is like, why should procurement teams be thinking about this beyond their sort of standard, supplier engagement model that they've already got in place today? So, the new consultation paper does make mention of operational resilience, right at the start, and the framework for actual kind of firms themselves, of banking and financial services firms themselves, that is relevant to suppliers. So to summarize, it's quite a long passage, but to summarize it, it basically says that kind of firms need to identify any important business services that kind of within certain tolerances, if they're disrupted, could have a severe impact on their ability to serve, and then sort of based on plausible scenarios, ensure that they've got kind of plans in place to continue to deliver those business services to their customer base as well, or into the market itself. So I guess when it comes to suppliers, the thought process is that a similar framework should be adopted as well. So what's your kind of thoughts on that, Abe?
Yeah, it is a very critical consideration, Rob. FS procurement teams are already managing risks, right? That is the policies and regulations and currently in place. This adds another layer to the supplier relationships that exist. So, for example, all critical suppliers to individual FS organizations would have contract level business continuity plans, exit plans in place with each of their clients. The additional expectations would be to look at this from an industry level, essentially. They would be conducting business continuity impact assessments annually. They would be reviewing their operational locations for flood risk, geopolitical risks, IT systems, applications, data, all of that needs to be secure. Telecommunications and networks need to have backup options. Same thing with key staff resources and so on.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I suppose building on that, for each of those, thinking about what are the recovery requirements, how long will the recovery time be, what resources are required for recovery. So I suppose financial services firms, that they need to to continue to assess this with their supply base, and because the eventual continuity of the service delivery for each firm is going to be their responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah, and the operational resilience discussions should become more than just a compliance, check in the box activity. They need to become an opportunity for financial services firms to strengthen their relationships with CTPs. It's an opportunity to align operational standards that financial services firms have to the ones that their critical suppliers operate within as well. It's going to create an opportunity that will create smoother collaboration and also reduce the risk of services being disrupted.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, I suppose it's all, obviously it's a hugely important area, and this probably brings me into the next point that it's kind of been playing on my mind, if you like, is this all sounds like quite a lot of time and activity, in addition to what's currently happening, and particularly, like you said, this additional burden onto suppliers. And so my thoughts are, does all this come with a cost attached to it? So maybe let's talk about some of the financial implications of these additional activities. So I think essentially because the critical third parties, now they have to be compliant to minimum resilience standards. They'll have to participate, as you mentioned, in sector-wide scenario tests. So that's an additional thing to what they do today. The outcome of these assessments could mean that there's detailed instructions that need to be implemented by specific critical third parties that and perhaps others less so. So for me, it feels like there's I don't know, undoubtedly it will have some cost implications, and I suppose the question is will that get passed on? Are there any other factors that should be taken into consideration here, Abin, that have an impact on cost?
Yes, it's particularly around, so CTPs could also now be subject to skilled person reviews, since they are now directly regulated by the Treasury. So skilled person reviews are effectively requested by the regulator if there are concerns about the operations. So skilled persons are, people at professional services firms that are qualified to conduct these reviews. They're generally paid for by the firm, but directed by the regulator. And the review will identify extent of damage, recommend remedial actions. So again, just stepping back from that as well, there's going to be increased assessment expectations, which includes resilience standards, scenario testing, skill person reviews, and all of this could lead to increased costs depending on the current operations of these organizations, depending on the scope and size of these organizations as well. So it's just one for procurement teams to be vigilant in understanding and managing these potential costs.
Yeah, interesting, and it'd be interesting how that sort of plays out. And I suppose one of the things we've talked about, I'm conscious we've probably used critical third parties and CTPs, the phrase, quite a lot in the opening part. But what about material supplier engagements here as well? That might not be designated as CTPs. Like teams need to be thinking about that, that kind of bunch of suppliers as well, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. It's not just about designated CTPs. Procurement functions should ensure that any supplier, even those not explicitly designated, adhere to similar resilience standards, right? That's going to be the new benchmark and standard that's set. So if we look at the entire financial third-party ecosystem in financial services in the UK, right, third parties that provide material services are a subset within that, and then critical third parties designated by the Treasury will be a further subset. So that being said, the resilience standards will be clearly defined, and they can serve as a guide for material third parties as well who are not designated CTPs.
Okay, yeah, I suppose that makes sense, but I guess this needs to be applied proportionally, on a proportional basis, right? I mean, for example, whilst CTPs will need to have and again, it's a phrase that's used in the consultation paper, financial sector continuity playbook. It may not be fair to expect, I suppose, those material third parties, but that aren't CTPs, to implement the same, but they're going to have to do something similar from what you're saying there, isn't it? And I don't know, again, think about the costs and the activities. This all seems like it's like a lot of ground to for procurement to cover. So is there any advice that we can give here, Abe?
Yeah, I guess practically it's about how we can build this into sourcing activities and contract renewal activities, or just to ensure that these designated CTPs follow the minimum resilience standards, or material non-CTPs also meet something equivalent and similar. Additionally, we would also advise our listeners to factor in potential FS risk premium into annual sourcing strategies, just meaning that procurement teams may want to bring forward certain discussions, ensure cost transparency, And as procurement professionals always do, challenge price hikes with potential CTPs. And as much as possible, start having these discussions before the bill is completely operationalized by the Treasury, because by that point you'll have the rest of the market reacting as well to it.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. So, all right, well, let's not dwell too much on pricing, and like let's maybe move on to a different obviously related but different subject. And you touched on it a little bit earlier on, but let's just talk about digitization and risk management here. So, I guess with that sort of increased scrutiny, I suppose there's a need for that enhanced digitalization of third-party risk management in procurement functions. So I guess in this new world that we're going to move into with the legislation, that static data becomes irrelevant quite quickly. So I suppose the existing risk management systems potentially, they may need a kind of a bit of a review.
Yeah, and I mean, digitization is becoming the key player in this scenario effectively. And exactly as you say, the increased scrutiny, dynamic regulatory landscapes, procurement functions need more robust systems in place, right? Now, organizations that are already compliant to the regulatory, materiality and outsourcing expectations, they need to look at where they are on the digital maturity journey and just on the third-party risk management journey. First step is to shift away from offline Excel forms, move away from other forms-based solutions to a workflow tool. There's tons of dedicated TPRM tools out there, and you also want the solution to ideally manage end-to-end supplier management. Like, it should be a seamless interaction.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you don't want that classic situation of your colleagues having to open one solution or one system for assessing the risk, and then another to onboard a supplier, and then another solution for managing the suppliers against the framework. I mean, I say ideally you want that kind of one end-to-end seamless solution. That that for me feels like the need of the hour. So I say ideally you want kind of this system to give you that real-time information about suppliers, things like their financial ratings, their ESG ratings, their cybersecurity ratings, etc.
Yeah, and exactly as you said, static data is no longer sufficient in this fast evolving environment. Just one more factor for consideration in the digital TPRM journey is that you also need systems that can enable communications with the suppliers. You want to send out questionnaires as part of your sub processes. Overall, the landscape is evolving. Procurement functions need systems that can keep up.
Yeah, makes sense. Like I say, the need of the hour is for organisations to look at kind of where they are on third-party risk, on that digitalization journey, and really aim for that end-to-end solution that they can give you that real-time information, as you mentioned. Just another area, I suppose it's a key area for procurement teams to think about. Another key kind of subject area, but it's kind of related to risk. And I think one of those areas is around kind of exit strategies with suppliers. So why do I specifically mention that? Why do we specifically mention that? Kind of, well, look, the Act grants regulators the power to prohibit firms from continuing to provide their services within the financial services industry if that particular supplier or that critical third party breaches those requirements. So, what this means is that the procurement teams, to try and address that risk, really, they need to try and widen the contractual exit rights, in case, say, there is a risk that any designated CTP, they are forced to exit that market, and you need to address that and find replacements or look for some continuity behind it as well. So, I guess reviewing and adapting exit strategies for CTPs in my mind is, it's like you mentioned before, it's not just going to be a regulatory requirement, a tick in the box. Yes, we have a business continuity plan in place or an exit strategy in place. It's going to be a strategic necessity. But just to get your experience on this, Abe, any sort of thoughts on how to approach this?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just exactly as you said, as procurement and risk professionals, it is our job to think about worst case scenarios. How do we have the right exit strategies in place? It's probably there's probably more to come in this space. The regulators will be publishing more material on how they plan to use the disciplinary measures in particular. So we should know more soon. In the meantime, FS firms and procurement teams need to have strong category strategies that could be triggered by external market information, right? Including, off the top of my head, initiation of a skill person review, because this information will be public. Contracts need to have wider and more robust exit rights, effectively.
Good. All right, Abe. I'm sort of conscious a little bit of time. We want to get some questions in, and I think we're sort of reaching the end of our chat today. But I suppose just to recap on some of the main points that we've discussed. So, I guess first off, we into these manageable chunks that we mentioned. So first off, we covered the operational resilience expectations for critical third parties, and then we talked about this sort of potential FS premium in pricing, and as a result of kind of the extra activity, so something for procurement teams to watch out for. After that, we then sort of we chatted a little bit about how this might impact some of the sourcing activities and what procurement teams might need to do. So, but I guess in summary, procurement teams are going to have to take some tactical but yet proactive steps until we know a bit more from the regulators.
Yeah. And I think we touched upon digitalization, what services firms can do right now, and depending on where they are in the digital maturity of TPRM. And lastly, I think we briefly covered off exit strategies as well.
Good.
Yeah, and that's a lot to take, I guess, in one session, but definitely an eye opener for me. I left these guys alone for a minute, and they covered it all. And I did hear that we are going to do another session, the session for the third part of the equation in January, maybe we will see. Yeah, but I think as much as eye opener this whole conversation has been for me, listening from the back end. I see the queries coming in, and I see that people who are listening to us also find equal value in the entirety of what we covered. But I think it's time to take a pause and take up the questions. So I will go in now with one of the questions that have come in. Um, all right then. Well, what is that one operational excellence strategy or step that must be implemented to empower the business? That has come from our audience. I mean, we have covered a lot of operational excellence steps, but maybe this is just maybe one of that is like a must to do uh, in the face of the new act that has come up.
Good. Abe, have you got any sort of kind of seeds of nuggets of advice here in terms of kind of that one step to sort of empower the business?
It's very difficult to narrow down on one step, but I think one of as a first step, definitely take out which is the small group of firms that we're looking at in terms of the critical suppliers and the material suppliers. Once we have that in place, it's about gathering all the information in terms of where is the relationship right now, what are the exit strategies in place, how long do we have the contracts and pricing locked in for. It's about assessing all of that information and seeing at what points will these get triggered in the timelines that we're looking at the bill becoming operationalized. So it's about putting the current landscape that we have and putting the operationalization landscape together and trying to see how these two line up. So it's about using that to create the overall category strategy.
Right. So basically, instead of waiting for long or just being relying on the sources and vendors that we had before, just do a recheck of what we have and kind of add or eliminate whatever is necessary for that strategy. Right? Did I sum it correctly?
Yeah.
I guess the other thing, and again we did touch on this during the session, is around that sort of that digitalization or the access to data, which is related to to the point that Abe's just mentioned. I think if we talk about empowering the business, that access to real-time data and insight around those kind of key suppliers, those material suppliers, those critical third parties, that for me will be the kind of the game changer for organizations if they've got that at their fingertips. What we often see is that kind of organizations, when they're managing their third parties, they often work in that sort of silo, which is sort of fairly cliche to say, but it's kind of those siloed organizations, kind of one team does talk to the next team, but they've got different systems and different ways of doing things. So that to me, if you know, that first step towards having that kind of that single view of data around your supply base and that single way of managing data around the suppliers, that's going to be, you know, one of the crucial areas.
Makes sense. I have a next question on this. So, how can procurement teams effectively negotiate and manage potential cost implications of these like smaller players that we are talking about, ensuring a fair and transparent approach to pricing dynamics? I think this is a very solid question because cost ultimately is the key factor for doing any strategy. So how can they effectively negotiate and manage?
Abe, again, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. So I think the first step is effectively identifying which firms are the smaller players, right? You look into their total revenue, then you would look at their UK specific revenue to financial services clients. You know, it depends on the level of relationship that you have with your suppliers. That you can ask these questions very openly, and then you would compare that to their wider revenue. You know, that will give you an indication of whether these additional regulatory expectations will encourage suppliers to potentially even sell off the UK FS products. Right, it depends on how important those lines are for them compared to the increased standards that are in expectations from the regulators, meaning that you may want to be more vigilant about sourcing. But yes, once you've identified who these suppliers are, you need to proactively conduct benchmarking activities, potentially carry out early contract negotiations. And yeah, just to call out, these are also the kind of requests that we as GEP can always support with.
Okay, awesome. Well, there's another question, and we have 2 minutes, so I probably think we can answer this. In the evolving landscape of third party risk management, digitization is crucial. We have discussed this extensively, of course. Could you recommend, and I think it means us, recommend specific third party management tools, risk management tools that financial services organizations should consider adopting to meet the real time information and communication requirements for the Act? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's like a tricky
Abe,
one because well,
Rob.
yeah, maybe I just we'll cover this one quite quickly actually because I think it's a tricky one to answer in the context of this webcast. But uh, there's many systems out there that do this. GEP have a system and a solution. Without kind of passing this off onto someone, I would suggest you just have a look at kind of organisations like Gartner and Forrester. They do great reviews on without promoting those guys. They do some great kind of market overviews of like who the leaders are in this space. So without kind of calling one or another out, I think that's your best source of trying to find which systems out there are kind of the leaders, which are going to meet your requirements. Obviously, do a sourcing activity beyond that as well, but I think that would be my advice rather than kind of steering you towards kind of specific tool.
Okay, fair enough. We do have one more question on exit strategy this time. Would you want to take this up? I think we can, right? We can spare a minute before concluding the session.
Sure, if you've got time, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the Act highlights the need for wider contractual exit rights and strategic planning for potential disruption. Can you provide practical guidance on how procurement teams should structure and stress test exit strategies to account for worst case scenarios and regulatory requirements?
Okay, Abe, did you want
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
to take that on? You're the expert.
So as of now, just yet, it wouldn't change much compared to what we currently do in terms of managing exit strategies, depending on the category of the material service and exactly what you're purchasing, right? You'll have different exit strategies or stressed exit strategies. So, for example, if it's a software, you can have the software set up in escrows where your firm can access the right to use the code. Depending on specific qualifiable events, of course. If it's a professional service, then you may ensure that you have all the data accessible by your firm in and knowledge transfer is executed in the right way. Um, Another approach is to have contingency plans ready. Not another approach. You should definitely have contingent plans ready. But specifically having the alternate suppliers in place. What you would like to make sure is in a stressed exit scenario, you want to be able to reduce the time as much as possible. So you don't want to conduct a stressed sourcing activity. you conduct that in advance. If you can have some legal discussions also in advance, of course, there's cost implications for setting up an alternate service in place. But yeah, exit can be a lot quicker if you do that, particularly for stress scenarios. Again, all of these are just a few things that we could do. It would really uh, depend on the specific service, the specific requirements. But again, one of these things, feel free to reach out to us if you want to have a chat about any specific supplier strategies.
Awesome. Well, that was a great session, a very timely catch up, and a lot of takeaways. And thankfully, Rob and Abe has already concluded the session. If you want to still reach out to them, feel free to drop a message to us, any of us, and we can get back to you in the timely manner. But yeah, see you on the other side of the year. Till then, take care of yourself and happy holidays.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.